On behalf of the Campaign for an Independent Britain, welcome to this meeting that we've organised to inform you about a rather sinister organisation. I was thinking of chairing this meeting, but we have a guest from one of our sister organisations, the Freedom Association, Rogert Helmer, who is the chairman of that association, as well as being an MEP for the East Midlands region. Unlike most MEPs, he sees it as his job to represent his constituents to the European institutions and not the other way around. And he's going to be taking up the chairing of the meeting, so I'll ask him to do so now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Edward. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for turning out on a wonderful sunny day when you may well have been wanting to sit in the garden by the pool. I'm delighted to see you here. And let me first of all thank Edward for inviting me to come and chair this meeting. Although I'm Freedom Association and Edward is Campaign for Independent Britain, I think we see eye to eye on a huge range of issues and have in the past cooperated on many points, and I have no doubt will continue to cooperate in the future. If I may just mention very briefly, I brought a few bits and pieces with me, including a video, a DVD, which is over there if you would like to have it. I've brought a postcard, which is a Where's Our Referendum postcard, and it contains a request for you to send to your MP, asking your MP to vote in the House of Commons for a referendum on the European Constitution. And I've also brought my favourite bumper sticker. And as a member of the European Parliament, I feel I have to tell people to love Europe, but if you fold it out the whole distance, it says, love Europe, hate the EU. There are only a few of them over there, but if you're prepared to put them on your bumper, please take one while there are still some there. Now, I'm looking forward very much to hearing our speaker this afternoon, Brian Gerrish, who is sitting right here with me, because he's going to be talking about an organisation. We're being very coy about this and not mentioning the name because we don't want to steal your thunder, Brian. But it's an organisation that I have heard lots of references to, but I don't pretend to know a great deal about. So I hope I'm going to learn a great deal today, and perhaps you will as well. That would be an excellent thing. Now, a bit of background. Brian, I've got to read this because I've got to get my details right, haven't I? Brian is a former naval officer and submarine warfare expert, and it says here, like in The Hunt for Red October. I don't think you're actually in the movie, but that's the sort of career that Brian has followed. So he's the sort of chap who knows what he's talking about. And together with his colleagues throughout the country, he's conducted detailed research into this organisation, which seeks to identify the, quotes, leaders of tomorrow, to inculcate a common ideology and encourage them to network with each other across their various departments and agencies. This organisation is now recruiting in schools, but is active in, guess what, the BBC, in the National Health Service, in local government, and also in police forces, regional government structures, which, as you know, many of us want to get rid of, in the armed forces, in government departments, communications, media, and industry. And it has a strong Europhile, pro-EU, pro-Brussels bias. Brian and his colleagues will conduct a vigorous campaign in Plymouth, from which I conclude, sir, that you're coming from Plymouth. Indeed. What better place for a naval officer to come from? Relentlessly exposing the questionable dealings of the local council, public-private partnerships with other agencies, many of whose officers are graduates of the organisation. And Brian, we are told, is going to name names. What we will do is we'll invite Brian to address us. We will then call on you to contribute to questions and a debate about this situation, and we will aim to wrap up, and I think we're looking at wrapping up by 4 o'clock. Okay, unless we completely run out of questions, in which case we may run out. We may wrap up by 3:30. Good. So with that, I will pass the floor, as we say. The floor doesn't actually move, but it's the term that's normally used in the Parliament. I will pass the floor and also the microphone to Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Right, I shall stand up because that always makes me feel better. Thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to give you a talk on an organisation. I've got a presentation which is getting bigger, and that's a bit of a problem in some ways because there's more and more information which I'd like to get across, but you can only do so much at a time. So I've presented it in a particular way, but what I'm going to talk about is what is happening in this country and why some of the things are happening. And I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things that I show you. And when we've gone through it, I hope you're going to ask me a lot of questions. I want you to challenge me and see what my answers are. Okay, so the more questions I get, the happier I will be. And once we've done that, we can probably start to have a look at what we do about the situation, because I believe that if we take some different actions to the ones that we've been taking over the last few years, we will get a different result. This is the problem, the European Union. Europe is fine, the people in Europe are fine, but the political organisation is very bad. In fact, it's evil. And I use that word deliberately. Now, we hope the technology is going to work, but it's been playing around a little bit for me. We're going to do a little bit of a talk on the hunt for Red October. I don't know how many of you have read the book or seen the film, but it was about a big submarine. And it was in the good old days when we knew who the baddies were. At that stage, the baddies were the Russians and the good guys were NATO, and that made life fairly easy. But I think that now times have changed. The subject's a serious one, because while we're able to visit the pub and have a beer, which I did before we started, there are young men and women dying overseas. This was a photograph taken in Iraq, but we know that the same thing's happening in Afghanistan. So whilst we can be very comfortable in this country, there are young service people giving their lives overseas for their queen and country. And whilst they are dying overseas, I believe that others are doing some very despicable things within this country, and I'm going to take the lid off that a little bit. This is a key part. Have you noticed that nothing seems to work in the country at the moment? It doesn't matter where you go, things are not right in schools, in the NHS, in the police, judiciary. I hear more and more people saying something along the lines of, I don't know what's going on, but something is because something weird's happening. And that's generally as far as they get. And then there are probably people like yourselves who are better informed. But a lot of people are saying that the country doesn't work. There are other funny things happening. I'm going to flick through this sequence very quickly, but I became interested as to why the press was suddenly very interested with Hitler. This is the Daily Mail. But after not seeing much of this gentleman for a large number of years, he's popping up in newspapers with monotonous regularity. There are some other things going on. This dates from 2005, but by the end of 2005, there'd been more attacks on Jewish property and persons in UK than ever before. And perhaps that's a bit of a worrying trend. We've got some interesting people involved with Nazi or fascist policies and people. And this is a picture ringed, which appeared again, I think, in the Mail, but showing Prince Philip attending funerals of relatives. And I don't know whether that raises any questions in your mind, but it raised a few questions in my mind. This is the Daily Mail again, a big article about 7,000 SS men who were allowed to stay in England. I'm not commenting much further, only that I find it very strange that we now seem to have articles and pictures almost glorifying the Nazi regime. But perhaps I'm mistaken. Now, if we talk about an enemy, it's a bit blurred, that one. I'm sorry, I've lost a little bit of definition on some of the pictures. But that is the ocean. And there's an enemy. And there's a tricky enemy because you can't see it. And the enemy that I'm after in this case is a submarine. It's real. Most of you will know what a submarine is. Most of you will know that the submarine can fire torpedoes or a missile and can sink ships and kill people. But the problem is you can't see it. And so one of the difficult areas of anti-submarine warfare is to find the submarine and then deal with it. It's hidden. And this really is the theme of my talk, because what we are experiencing at the moment is an attack. It's real, it's going on, but the only trouble is you can't see the beast that's attacking you. And what I'm going to try and do is put a bit of light on it, because underneath that sea can be a very nasty monster. I've cheated a bit because this happens to be Vanguard, which is one of Britain's nuclear deterrent submarines, so this one's friendly, but nevertheless it makes the point that often you cannot see the thing which is going to attack you. Now this is the main focus of my talk, is an organisation called Common Purpose. 5 years ago I'd never heard of it. No idea, never heard of it. Even though I'd been in business for quite a long time, I was a director of the local Chamber of Commerce in Plymouth. I can say that I was quite well involved in the community. Never heard of it. And then suddenly we discover this organisation. We start to ask some questions, in particular about public money and what it's doing. And very quickly my life is turned upside down, because together with a small number of other people, I am threatened. Death threats, late night phone calls, knocks on the door, used hypodermic needles, bricks go through colleagues' windows. A whole series of very nasty things happened within about a month of us starting to ask some penetrating questions about this organisation. I ask you, how many of you have heard about this? You may have heard about it in relation to this presentation. How many of you have heard about it before? Okay. Can I ask where you heard about it? From David Noakes, who I work with very closely, so perhaps you heard about it from me ultimately. But this is the key point. Here is an organisation. It is like a cancer through our society, but you don't know about it. You, the taxpayer who pays for it, generally doesn't know about it. Now, the interesting thing about this charity, and I'll explain, a lot of the view graphs I've got are documents. You will not be able to read them all at the back, but I have a problem. I can't show you each document in great detail, but what I can do is talk about them, and if you challenge me and say, is that document real? I can show you the whole document. But this is one of the strange things about Common Purpose as a charity. It encourages meetings under the Chatham House rule, which says that when you have a group of people meeting together, you can use the information, but you're not allowed to say where you got the information or indeed who gave it. Now that is a very interesting rule when you compare it with probity, the need for organisations to be open and accountable. There seems to be a bit of a conflict, but this is the rule of Common Purpose. I'm not going to bother to try and read through this, but if you'll believe me, this is about diversity. Common Purpose says it's about developing future leaders of society, and it also pushes very, very hard that we should become a very diverse nation. Common Purpose says that in every boardroom of every organisation, on every commission and panel, we should have an equal number of other ethnic origins or people. Now, maybe that isn't such a bad thing in some ways. In fact, I don't think it is. But in the way that Common Purpose uses it, there are some things to worry about. Quite a lot of words from a charity which believes that diversity is a strength both in organisations and in society. We believe this is because it is in the mixing of ideas, culture, worldviews and experiences that society progresses. If you think about what they're saying the way our country used to be was no good. because there's a much better way of doing it, and we need to mix and change. Just an idea. Now, we'd never heard of common purpose in Plymouth, and then we started to dig, and we were absolutely stunned because we found it everywhere. So what I've done is listed all the key areas of society in Plymouth where we found CP, common purpose. And that was everywhere. The hospitals, the schools, the local council, within the military, particularly in the local naval base, the police were involved, the judiciary were involved, accountants and school children. And this was very odd because you think you're quite well informed, you've never heard of an organisation, particularly this wonderful leadership charity, and then you find that lots of people are involved, including people from the church and including members of parliament, a few. Now, one of the things that we began to learn about common purpose, and I can say at this point that they had, if we go back 4 years, a website that had a coded area to it, so the normal person couldn't get in. But a gentleman took a visit into that website, and he found documents where common purpose was talking about how to control a city. And what it said was that if we can control the key people in a city, we can control the city. And this little pyramid of power shows you Plymouth and shows you which key people are involved with common purpose. So at the time I drew this out, the Labour leader of the council, a Mr. Tudor Evans, was common purpose. The chief executive, Barry Keel, the head of social services, the head of planning, head of legal services. So everywhere you went in the city, common purpose people were controlling what happened. If you control planning and you control legal services, it's impossible for you to do anything. And what we really became suspicious about is down here we've got the local police, and this is becoming a bit insidious. But we also discovered that not only were the police involved with common purpose, people who we knew were criminals were also involved with it. And we then started to discover that there were people who were perverted who were involved with it. And if you ask me what I'm talking about people strongly suspected of being paedophiles. So we were very curious as to why our city had suddenly taken up with this charity. Now, the way common purpose works is it has set itself up, in its own words, to fill the space between the democratic elected government and the body of society. So I've tried to get it in a diagrammatic form, but across the country, common purpose has regional directors, and then in each city they set up an advisory board, like a little cell. And that cell propagates new common purpose people right the way across society and right the way down through society until they are getting into schools and giving school children special courses. I believe that in many cases parents are totally unaware of this. Now, these are snapshot paragraphs taken from common purpose documents which were cited on the web by a gentleman well qualified to comment. He did not download them because at the time he didn't want to leave a footprint. However, the first document was about controlling your host city. It was talking about social engineering and control by common purpose links in a city. It was talking about selecting children, 12 to 14 years, and grooming them to become future leaders of society. And it also said very clearly that the aim was to get common purpose future leaders controlling society. They wouldn't be elected democratically, but these people would be put into position. And I believe these people mean what they say. Ordinary people are to be coerced into a new way of thinking. We are to be engineered into a correct society, and common purpose is going to work right the way across society. It doesn't matter whether you work for the government or you work in a private company, common purpose has got some plans for you. All bodies of responsibility and influence should be involved with common purpose. That's a pretty dictatorial expression from a charity, but they're using it. And this was the key one for me. Common purpose loyalty meant you're loyal to common purpose first, before your company or organisation. Now, the moment I saw that, and I knew that people in the military were involved in this organisation, I knew that this was a direct breach of the Official Secrets Act. I wrote some letters, and I received some very strange replies from organisations who should have crawled all over me to see what I knew. So I discovered very quickly, and I was dealing then and I am dealing now with other well-informed people, we realised that when you started to ask questions about common purpose, you got a wall starting to come up. It's a very serious talk, and it's hard to make fun of serious subjects, but basically, one piece of advice is that when you're in deep shit, keep quiet. Amongst the hounds, there is a fox. For those that can see it, I know it's a bit small. And I believe that at the moment, that poor little fox is the United Kingdom, and we are surrounded by some very unpleasant European Union hounds. Now, I hope you're going to stay with me. I'm going to do this quite quickly. I've got to prove to you that when I talk about an organisation doing strange things, I can prove it. We're not talking theory, we're talking reality, we're talking documents, we're talking people. Is it a conspiracy? Yes. A conspiracy is a real thing. It's a crime. And I'm going to show you a conspiracy happening, but I'm going to strip away the theory because we're going to deal with documents. Now, this is part of an internal memo from a company set up by Plymouth City Council called the Single Regeneration Budget Company. It has had £51 million worth of money. There are no detailed audited accounts. I can prove that. However, in the minutes, the people spending 51 million say that each project should have a common purpose graduate allocated to that project. Now just think of the implications, because we already know that common purpose graduates are invited to work under the Chatham House rule, so they do things behind closed doors. Now we're putting them together with public money. This is very bad because it's old, but it's an email where Common Purpose has sent in to a chap called Robert Plum, who's was the head of development in Plymouth City Council, and Common Purpose is asking this council employee to recruit for them. So he's taken Common Purpose's email and he sent it to all his chums. So whilst you paid Mr. Robert Plum to be a member of the local council, an officer, and to do his job, he was actually using council time and facilities to recruit for Common Purpose. He's not allowed to do that. Now, the South West of England RDA, any time you hear anything regional, it means you're dealing with the European Union. And this is a letter following a Freedom of Information request where the South West RDA said they'd spent £30,000 worth of money on Common Purpose. That's taxpayers' money. You've paid for that. This is the Government Office of the South West, and they've spent £60,000. The old Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, when I initially contacted them, denied all knowledge of Common Purpose. They didn't know what it was. But when we pushed them, they eventually told us that they'd spent £80,000 in the last couple of years alone. So we're getting some quite big sums of money starting to appear in relation to a charity. Now, I'm interested in the police, because if you lose control of police forces, you start to lose control of law and order. So we sent a little letter to Devon and Cornwall Police, and we asked them how much they'd spent on common purpose and how many officers were involved with it. And they sent back a letter. I'll just read you this paragraph. It says, "This is to inform you that I cannot identify any specific records or documents held by Devon and Cornwall Constabulary. The police were telling me that they didn't really have any knowledge of common purpose. So I phoned them up and said, basically they had a problem. And the lady said to me, what's that? And I said, well, your accounts are either poor or fraudulent, because I know you've spent money. So I gave her some help. I sent her a letter in which I told her the names of 4 Devon and Cornwall police who were involved with common purpose. And the first one is a lady called Maria Wallace. I spelt her name wrongly, unfortunately. It's W-A-L-L-I-S, but she's the chief constable. So I told the police that the chief constable was involved to give them some help. And what a surprise. When I did that, they told me they'd spent £57,000. But remember that originally they said they didn't know anything about it. Now, they promised me some more information. I didn't get it. And they sent me a letter where down the bottom they said, we're currently seeking the views of common purpose as to whether we should give you the information. So we've got a charity working behind closed doors, but when something happens, the police contact the charity to ask whether the tax-paying public can have the information. We'll play a bit. Here's Cressida Dick. Does anybody know the significance of this lady? Yeah, the London tube bomb shootings, de Menzies, she is the lady that authorised the murder of, effectively, the murder of de Menzies. She is senior common purpose. Did she have a meeting behind closed doors? Now, your local paper. I've heard for a long time that when we write articles about the European Union and how bad it is, they don't get printed. It happens in the West Country, Western Morning News, Evening Herald, it happens with the Telegraph, it happens with all the papers. And that's very interesting as to why. So we wrote to the editor of the Western Morning News and we said, we've been informed that as a graduate, common purpose graduate member, you've held closed door meetings with the City Council. So we sent the letter and we got a letter back from Mr. Qualtrough where he said, you're misinformed. I'm not a graduate member of Common Purpose, nor do I intend to be one. Furthermore, no meetings took place. Well, we know the meetings took place because we've got a witness who says they took place, but he says he hasn't been involved with Common Purpose. Well, this is a little bit strange because this is Common Purpose's own list of 2002 participants, and down here we have Alan Qualtrough, editor of the Evening Herald. Now my question to you is, was Mr. Qualtrough misguided? Did he forget? Was he confused? Or was he lying? Something's wrong.
You did allow him to get out, though, didn't you? You said, are you a graduate then?
Yeah.
He said no.
Yeah. If you do the course, you're a graduate. That's the definition. Yeah. But why would he need a let-out clause? Would that...
So I'm going to have to answer the question. And you,
so we've...
Your opinion behind
Yeah.
specific legal comment.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be pinned down. There's something odd, isn't there? Now then, this is something else about people. This is a letter which has come from a chap called Richard Bailey, who's the head of the Government Office South West down in Plymouth. And he says, with relation to the Common Purpose Advisory Group, the core group in Plymouth and other cities, says, I should begin by explaining that I occupy this post as an individual citizen rather than in my role as a civil servant at the government office. That's what he says. Well, of course, he's written it on headed paper anyway, but he says, yes, I'm involved with Common Purpose, but I do it as an individual citizen. But this little piece of paper says that the 19th of May 2005, when Common Purpose had a Power Map programme day in the council, Richard Bailey was a keynote speaker from 10 in the morning to 11:15. I'm going to suggest to you that that is not in his private time, that's in his official capacity. But I might be wrong. Now, I'm going to go through these quite quickly, but these are all to do with communications between people in councils and Common Purpose. And here's Common Purpose saying to a member of one of the councils, can you introduce me to the Chief Fire Officer? So they are using people within the public sector to do work for them. And look at schools. It says that Common Purpose needs help in networking my way towards the right heads. Can anybody tell me what the definition of a right head teacher is?
A head teacher has a sympathetic view to their class.
Possibly, but what they're doing is selecting people, and this little thing shows it without a doubt. We've got another one. This is connecting Mr. Mike Moore, Chief Executive of Suffolk County Council. Here he is doing his work with Common Purpose. And we're doing a different bit of selecting now. Here is your local council chief executive saying that David Coe of Coe's department store, I don't know him and wonder if he's to Ipswich. Now what they're doing is lining up people to be invited to do the Common Purpose course, and here's the local chief executive, again in public paid time, deciding that he doesn't want somebody, people being selected, people being refused. This is not nice. This is Common Purpose talking to the head of European and Economic Development. Notice the title, Head of European and Economic Development in Norwich City Council. Dear Chris, further to our discussions, you kindly offered a contribution of 250 quid. So here is a charity just going to the public sector, taking money. But if you phoned up and you said, I'm actually asking for money for my local hospice, you wouldn't necessarily get any money. But this is happening on a phenomenal scale, and it's not just £250. We've got leads. I'm taking you around the country. It says that the purpose of an advisory group, the board in each city, is to be the eyes and ears of Common Purpose. Can you explain to me why a charity needs people in senior positions in each city to be its eyes and ears? And what are they looking for? What do they want to hear? And you've never heard of this. Here's the police. And here we have a senior police officer, the chief of police, running the Common Purpose Advisory Group. And of course, he's doing it in his own private time, isn't he? On police-headed paper. Not only do they take money, they use facilities. This is Common Purpose, which has buried itself in the Department for Education in Sheffield. And very often, Common Purpose is using office space that's provided free. Only it's not free because you, the taxpayer, have paid for it. When they really get going, they set up funding which they pull straight out of the public sector purse. So in the grid at the bottom, common purpose is showing how much money it's going to take from Leeds City Council in September 2005 and September 2006. And they're going to have £5,000 in each year. They're also going to take £10,000 in each year from the local education budget. But what for? Here's a piece of paper where common purpose is telling a gentleman from Leeds government, I don't know whether it's the chief executive, I've forgotten, but I believe so, is telling him what to do. Don't worry, it's just a question of signing the letter. Well, I'm very worried about this because I'd like to know what a charity is doing, telling senior people in the public sector what to do. This is Preston, and we've got a letter where common purpose is congratulating the chief executive. Almost 1/3 of the group joined as a result of your efforts. Well done, chief executive. You are recruiting and bringing new people into common purpose. Do you get a warm feeling? There's some quite big people connected with common purpose. It started supposedly in 1985. A lady called Julia Middleton, the chief executive, suddenly had £500,000 to start this wonderful charity. But very quickly Camelot got involved, and this is a bit of text showing that they were sponsoring common purpose to create the Citizens Connection through the Millennium Experience National Programme. Do you remember the Millennium Dome? Well, there was a bit more to the dome than met the eye, because the dome programme cost 800 million. 300 million was spent on the structure, and 200 million was spent on the fitting out, 500 million. We don't know what happened to the other 300 million. In fact, there was a big fraud case started, and then all of a sudden that fraud case dissipated. Lord Faulkner, the single shareholder of the Millennium Experience Company, assisted, I believe, by Mr. Heseltine. So 300 million disappeared. And I am going to suggest that that 300 million was used to fund a lot of the things that Common Purpose is doing. This is an agenda for a training day, and it's talking about Derby, Leicester and Nottingham. And these are the types of people involved. We've got a brigadier, we've got a community centre managing director, and Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dixon Warren. Well, I'd like to know what he's doing having meetings with Common Purpose, because as far as I'm concerned, he's breaching the Official Secrets Act. When you see funny things happening in some of the public sectors and you dig, you very often find it's Common Purpose. So this was Strathclyde firemen. Do you remember they didn't want to go and hand out leaflets at a gay march? They refused to do it. And the net result was the fire chief chastised them, and they were all told to go and attend diversity training. By coincidence, this man just happens to be a senior Common Purpose man. If you try and say, we don't like what you're doing, Common Purpose, you would normally go somewhere to try and complain, wouldn't you? But the only problem is, when you do go somewhere, you find that that body is topped up with Common Purpose people anyway. And here is the Commission on Good Governance in Public Services, and here's the member of the Commission. They're all, of course, unbiased. But we have Lucy de Groot and Sir Bob Kerslake, Chief Executive of Sheffield City Council, County Council, I beg your pardon, who just happen to be senior, very senior Common Purpose people. So just imagine going to this team to complain about Common Purpose. What's going to happen? Not a lot. Now, we have been digging very hard, and we've got a big team now across the country who've been asking a lot of questions for a lot of time. And one of the Freedom of Information requests produced a fantastic letter. This is a letter from a lady called Caroline Duckworth, who's the operating officer for Common Purpose. And she sent this letter to all of the key Common Purpose people in each city. And what she says is that in recent weeks, some members of the public are challenging whether taxpayers' money is being wisely used by Common Purpose. That's what she says. And she goes on, following consultation with expert lawyers, public relation advisors and local government leaders, we are recommending that when our programme coordinators receive calls like this, they should refer them to the programme director without conversing. This charity is so worried about what it's doing that when you say, where's the money coming from, where's the money going, they're dealing with expert lawyers, but they are also dealing with local government leaders. Well, who gave them the authority to work with the local government leaders in the first place? Did you? Did anybody vote for them? Did anybody give this charity political power? No. We're moving up a bit. We've had school children at the bottom. We're starting to look at who's at the top of Common Purpose. Here's Julia Middleton, the chief executive, married to a very senior media man. She previously was part of Demos. Does anybody know what Demos is? It's a Marxist think tank, basically. Marxist, you could call it Trotskyist if you want. Communist, doesn't matter. That's what she did. She's now chief executive of a leadership charity. This man, very, very important, because Jeff Mulgan is the man who set up Demos. And Demos and Common Purpose are very closely connected. And it says here that Mr. Mulgan was part of a secret committee in 1995, led by Mandelson, which examined policy changes, and they worked intimately with Tony Blair. Now, I've already shown you that Common Purpose was connected very closely with the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, and here we've got it connected with a Mr. Mulgan, who's directly connected with Tony Blair. And if anybody thinks Gordon Brown is any better, I'm going to disappoint you. This is a bit more of the same document, but showing the people mixing. We've got Jeff Mulgan, wrote a book, The Other Invisible Hand, Remaking Charity for the 21st Century. Mr. Mulgan produced a book which was to do with using charities for different purposes. You get a clue to what he wants to do because he actually doesn't tell you what he wants to use the charity for. But there was an article in the paper about 2 weeks ago where we got a clue. Did anybody see the article where Ed Miliband was challenged? Because he was producing a paper saying it should be acceptable, it should be legal for charities to get involved politically. You saw that. And it was the Tory shadow charities minister who picked up on it. And he said this is sinister. Now, what I'm going to suggest Ed Miliband, his father actually was a communist, but what Mr. Ed Miliband was doing was trying to cover up the fact they know the lid is coming off Common Purpose. A few more, just so that you know. Sir Jeremy Beecham, Janista McIntosh. And let's look at it as a diagram. What we got down here is what I call the EU control structure. Now, I know the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister is gone, but all they've done is moved it into the Communities Department. It's gone in name, it hasn't gone in function. And the DTI, Department of Trade and Industry, but that really stands for deception, trickery and intrigue, because the DTI is rotten. We've got the government office of the regions, we've got the regional assemblies, we've got the regional development agencies, private sector and the general public, and at the bottom we've got the school children. And what Common Purpose is doing is injecting its people into each layer of that society, the selected leaders of the new society. And where does Common Purpose get its direction from? A little cluster of very nasty think tanks, of which Demos we've talked about, but we've got the Council of Foreign Relations, the Tavistock Institute, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Work Foundation, and some others. But what is the basis of these people? They want to change our society. You can say they are slightly fascist, or you can say they're slightly socialist, communist. It's a sort of mix. But all of these horrible ideas are being sucked up into Common Purpose, and then like a cancer, they go into this new layer of EU government. Can I prove these connections? Well, we can, because this is a 2020, that's the name of a Common Purpose programme. This is a training day, and here we've got a brief by Dr. Catherine Fleshy, the acting director of Demos. So we've got people going to a very senior Common Purpose meeting, and they're being briefed by a communist organisation. What's even more peculiar is down the bottom, we've got Sir Richard Mottram, the Security and Intelligence Coordinator of the Cabinet Office. He's also going. So I'm getting confused as a military man, because originally we had a problem with the communist world, we had a problem with the fascist world, and we had a democracy. And that's what I signed up to defend. And that's what people are dying for in Iraq and Afghanistan. But now, at senior government level, we're inviting these people in for tea. This is another meeting, and here I can prove to you that they're very pro-Europe. Europe, how does it work? And we've got Matthew Rees, Councillor, Private Office of the General High Representative, Council of the European Commission. And it's hosted by the European Economic and Social Committee. This is a charity. It's not. It is a very, very vicious, cell-like structure that is working, and you can't see it. BBC is riddled with it. I'll just put BBC up there to give you a flavour. But we've got a visit to 10 Downing Street. Matthew Taylor, Chief Advisor of Political Strategy. Ruth Turner, do you remember her? Mixing with Common Purpose. When you delve into Common Purpose, you come into relation with fraud and corruption, missing money, political agendas, and it leads you in other directions, because it led to having a look at the IPPR, the Institute for Public Policy Research, which even the papers blew open as having had £1 million worth of public money. This is another highly political organisation. Pro-EU. This is part of the Common Purpose programme trying to suck children into the EU, saying you can live in Paris, travel to Portugal, it's all wonderful. But they don't tell the truth, they just give a pro-European view. They're not allowed by law to be political. These are some quotes by Common Purpose people. Now I'm going to take your mind a step further. Common Purpose is not just about doing a course about leadership. Common Purpose is about doing a course which changes the way you think. If I said to you, I'm going to a Moonies meeting tomorrow, I wonder if any of you would like to come with me, I would guess that most of you would refuse, because you know that the Moonies are a cult, and you know that cults can take people and change them. Some young people are changed so much they don't want to see their families, they give up all their wealth. It's real, it can be done. This is a very insidious organisation because it's using cult-type techniques for a political purpose. And we have got people who have come to us who have been depressed, who are extremely anxious, who are in a horrible state as a result of doing these courses. This lady, the chief executive of Lloyd's, gives you a hint. Common purpose is no easy ride. It challenges every personal and professional prejudice you have. Well, most people, I don't believe, start off with prejudice. They start off with views. But according to Common Purpose, you've got prejudices, and Common Purpose is going to deal with them. And this lady tells you it unsettled her. I can tell you that a lot of senior people who've got involved with Common Purpose have gone on to have some form of mental problem. Maria Wallace disappeared and was not particularly well, and that's reported by people close to her. Bishop of Exeter is another one. Just more quotes. I'm going to jump through some bits. Very big companies involved, Vodafone, but we started to see some information saying that not only did Common Purpose have a cell network set up across UK, but they were now starting to link UK with Europe. And this little paper says, I work for Common Purpose International. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Common Purpose International. It's remarkably close to the Communist Party International. I work with Common Purpose International as a development director, and basically we are setting up with links with France, and they're linking with Lille in France, and they're starting to join together the networks of Common Purpose leaders. So your local democratic government is being hollowed out from the inside, whilst these people talk to each other not only across UK, but now over into Europe. We've got other documents which show exactly what they're doing. Here's the big guns. Deborah Helmer, Press Office, Prime Minister's Office. She says, it was the most stretching and thought-provoking course I've ever been on. Too right, because she's had her brain scrambled. We've got people who are saying Common Purpose changed my whole world. And boy, do they like children. So this is yet another course. This isn't crossed out, by the way. Somebody did a highlighter on it. This program targets young people who have already shown evidence of leadership skills in civil society. Perhaps I'm getting old, but it seems to me that children at the moment lack the basics of leadership. They're not showing leadership skills, they're showing signs of being out of control, losing values. So what is this political charity doing playing with school children's? I think we're going to need to change the tape fairly shortly. So on that note, I will pause. And while we're changing the tape, I'm very happy to answer some questions.
As a general rule of thumb, I've noticed that the more an organisation talks about diversity, the less it practices it. It's also true in the North American continent. Yeah. You'll produce, for example, a candidate who is black, yeah, who is female, who is even disabled, you think would be ideal. And then they will be vetoed because they have the wrong political opinions. Now, of course, there are organisations closer to home. For example, I'm a member of the Conservative and Unionist Party, where you can produce someone who's black, female, disabled. No chance at all of getting on the candidates list if they have the unprogressive political opinions. So, by diversity, I would put it to you that they mean the opposite of diversity. They mean uniformity, agreeing with us 100% or else.
This is a very good question. It's a very good question because it was a little area that we decided to look at. And in fact, we've got some emails where common purpose, what they were asked is how many people over 50 do you employ? That's what we went for because they talk about age is no barrier. They wouldn't answer the question, how many people do you employ in your London office over 50? They wouldn't answer the question. Then the ladies said that they were going to have a meeting about it and we would get an answer. And they had the meeting and we still didn't get an answer. Then it was going to go to their board, who were going to give us an answer, and we never did get an answer. Why would they be so frightened of how many people over 50 they did or didn't employ? But the other thing is that on the ground, they say they are for diversity, and you do see coloured people, however you want to describe them, Muslims or whatever, involved, but the people who are within common purpose itself, I'm not politically correct, and if I was with some of my other friends here, it would work better, but if they're coloured, of whatever nationality that means, then it is their political view that's the most important one. So you're absolutely spot on. And they're very frightened when you ask them this question.
I can answer your question about the age factor. Of course, first of all, if they are practicing age discrimination, that's a criminal offence now, which is worth examining. But there's also another point, which may sound slightly paranoid, but it happens to be true. As someone gets older, you lose many things, but you do gain one thing. It becomes progressively harder and harder to condition you. It's about the only advantage of getting older.
Yep.
So if your primary purpose is to condition people, the last people you want on earth to deal with are people who are getting on in years, because you have to work so much harder to actually condition them.
Another good point, and the other thing is that your age allows you to remember life before versus what it is now.
We're ready to go again. If I
Okay.
just comment, don't
Do you
get
want
too hot on the ages and things, because all my staff are under 30.
Okay. Do you want to just do two more questions, just while we're waiting? Because I think there's a couple of gentlemen there.
Okay, good. Who else has another question? We have two side by side there, so let's put two pairs in one step.
As a result of your activities and the fact that you are ex-service, are you or have you been the subject of any inquiries by the government security services, and are you aware that are there any files on what you are doing?
I'm certainly aware that there are files on what I'm doing, because when I initially wrote to the security services, there's no great secret to this. I'm allowed to say that because of what I did, when I'm showing you my hunt for a Red October bit, I have been security cleared in my day to a pretty interesting level, and that means that everything about me is known. It also means that if I make a statement on things that I've seen, I should be treated as a reliable witness. Not only was I making a statement, I had a corroborating witness making a statement as well. We wrote to the Directorate of Naval Security, where we know that some things happened, but most interestingly, they eventually wrote us a letter back saying, well, Common Purpose was a charity, and if I had a problem, I should contact the Devon and Cornwall Police. But we already knew that Devon and Cornwall Police were riddled with Common Purpose. So I found out by putting a few letters out that there was something very wrong within the security services. And I will stand by that, because although he's had a lot of bad press recently, David Shaler and his girlfriend from MI5, in talks they do, say that far from protecting the public now needs protecting from the security services. So yes, there is definitely files on me, and I can also tell you that I have interesting things happen to me, but I don't get threatened anymore.
Because there are special branch officers at most manned police stations in this country, and
Yeah.
it's happening for years.
Yeah, but you cannot even get fraud dealt with through Devon and Cornwall Police for a variety of reasons. There's one of my difficulties is I'm watching my watch. Okay, so I'll leave that question there. Let me get through the rest of it. Okay, I'm going to go as quickly as I can, and then we'll open it up. Okay, so school children, particularly vulnerable. Bit of fun here. I am very suspicious of all political parties, okay? I just go by ordinary people now, what their views are. I don't mind whether you're a Conservative or Labour. Are you a good person? But UKIP has been doing a lot, supposedly, at the higher levels. And here is Lehman Brothers involved with Common Purpose. Now, Lehman Brothers, I think I'm correct in saying that a chap called Lithgow, who's the new public relations officer for UKIP, worked for them at one stage. I think that's true. I may be wrong. Here's the police again. Fife Constabulary, Chief Constable Peter Wilson. He is totally involved in Common Purpose, and he's getting involved in in the policing of anti-poverty activity. Wherever there's anything political going on, like with Miss Cressida Dick, it seems that Common Purpose people are very keen on it. This is the teaching side of it again. This is IPPR at work, but we've got a variety of people coming together talking about the future of the teaching profession. And if we look at the people involved in that dialogue on the future of the teaching profession, bang, up we come with Julia Middleton, the Chief Executive of Common Purpose. This lady's everywhere. She's all over the country. She knows everything there is to know about leadership. She's never done a proper day's job in her life because she's been through the political system, but she's in everything going, telling you how to run your life. And here we've got Matthew Taylor from IPPR that seems to have sucked on £1 million of money that's disappeared. This one's to do with Mr. Taylor himself, political strategy, and this is Common Purpose dealing directly into Downing Street to line itself up with meetings. It's a pretty good charity. Here's Common Purpose in a pally letter to Ruth Turner. And this is a bit of text which is talking about the Dome. Common Purpose Citizens Connection is linked to the shared ground zone at the Dome, made possible by Camelot. Have you ever wondered why all of a sudden they got keen on the lottery? The lottery was created because it's a perfect way of laundering money. You take money, you end up with billions of pounds, and then you give it to all the causes you want to give it. And they are giving it to causes which are helping to break the country down. That's why the local WI who needs a new hall doesn't get money, but a local political group of immigrants will get the money. And here's good old Lord Falconer. Now, I haven't got time to show you more on Lord Falconer, but Lord Falconer's been intimately involved with diversity and Common Purpose. And of course, he was intimately involved in the setting up of the law courts in order to protect children. And you will have seen recently big articles in the paper about children being taken away to meet government targets. Have you all seen that? Well, it's been in all of the major papers. We have got proof that public organisations, city councils, were given targets by the government, and the more children they took away from their parents, the more money they've got. If you go into an area and have a quick look, you find Common Purpose. I spent about 5 minutes on the internet the other day looking at the South East. This is the South East of England Development Agency. I was a bit surprised at that. It's got 1,182 papers on foreign policy. Why? Do you know why? Because the European Union has told all of our regional organisations to start developing their own foreign policy, because they're going to deal directly with Brussels. We weren't spotting people. Here she is. This is the lovely Julia Middleton. It's not a very nice photograph of her. If she sends me a better one, I'll change it. This is a South East of England Development Agency board meeting. Load of subjects, but here's Julia Middleton. Oh, right next to Prince's Trust. I believe that's Prince Charles's favourite little one, isn't it? So here's this lady. She was educated in France and Switzerland. She came to England. She started to work for the Work Foundation, which many people would regard as socialist. She then goes to Demos. Then she's got £500,000, and then her charity is everywhere. And if you look at the board, I quickly spotted a name I'd seen elsewhere, Mr. Faruqi. And here's Mr. Faruqi. And if you read the text on him, he's never been elected to anything in his life. He is a professional person. He's been on the Learning and Skills Council, the British Urban Regeneration Association. He was the chief executive of the London Borough of Southwark, but he's never been elected democratically. And he's now earning a fortune, and he's common purpose. What's going on is this country's being attacked. And they are doing it by taking over things from the inside. And when you complain and you stamp your feet and you say, my local paper won't print my letter, I laugh. Of course they won't print the letter because the editors are common purpose or, as this gentleman suggests, a similar type of organisation. But basically, the European Union is attacking us, and it's everywhere. Society, family, military, police, you name it, they have got into the grain. And that is why it is pointless jumping up and down and complaining about the European Union over there in Brussels. That isn't the problem. That's like an army waiting to invade. The problem we've got at the moment is the threat is in this country. When you know where to look for it, it becomes a much happier picture, because when you know where the enemy is, where you know where that submarine is, you can deal with it. This is what they're working to. They are working to undermine, demoralise and destroy this country so that we are subsumed into the European Union. Now, I was in the car the other day with a guy who's done a lot of good work for us, and we're driving along and he said to me, Brian, what do you think these people are playing at? What are they doing? Are they playing politics? Are they out for personal gain? And I said, just run that by me again, and he repeated it. He didn't know what they were, what are they doing? And I said, they're going to kill you. These people are not playing a game. What do they want to do to you? They want to destroy you completely. Because the destruction, if you take the hospitals as an example, people are dying in our National Health Service as a result of it being collapsed. It's being collapsed deliberately. I'm not squeamish about this. When you do the military background, you talk about it. There's the bad guy. The aim is to kill them before they kill you. But whilst our troops at the moment are overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, the real enemy is attacking this country. And common purpose is a key part of it. Now, I'm going to finish on this quote, but this is a quote by a chap called Blair, who was Stalin's right-hand man. And he defined psychopolitics, the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. He doesn't mean mental healing making you well, he means making you into a socialist. And here, by psychopolitics, our chief goals are carried forward to produce a maximum of chaos in the culture of the enemy. Our fruits are grown in chaos, distrust, economic depression, scientific turmoil. And I'm going to suggest to you that that is what you are now living in. And one of the ways that's being propagated is by common purpose. And I'll stop there if I may.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian. available to us to questions and debate. And can I abuse my position as chairman by asking a question, if you will allow me? The question I would ask, Brian, is this. Imagine we had somebody here from Common Purpose, and let me play devil's advocate for a moment. I think what I would be saying is something along the lines of, look, we're interested in improving life in Britain by improving leadership skills. That's what we're about. So, of course, we go to organisations which are influential, we try and deliver these courses, we go to schools because we want to encourage leadership skills and we want these young people to grow up and take leading positions in our society. We have a series of programmes we think that make people much more effective leaders. So we're a bit like the Industrial Society, which does industrial training, but we focus particularly on leadership. And there are other, both commercial and, I believe, charity organisations that do similar things. Common Purpose just happens to be a big one and a successful one. And then you say, well, okay, you're teaching people about the European Union. This is propaganda. And they will say, well, we're teaching people how decisions are made that affect their lives, and whether you like it or not, a great many decisions are made in Brussels, just as a great many decisions are made in Westminster. Therefore, if we're teaching people about how decisions are made in society, of course we're going to teach them about how the European Union works, and we're going to take them to the Parliament. We are just a training organisation. But of course we have links with other think tanks who work on areas like this. Of course, because we're successful, we get into large companies, we get companies supporting us, and we work to an extent with the government because they've seen the benefit of the wonderful training that we deliver. Now, if they were to say that to you, how would you respond?
Well, I'd say that is a wonderful description of Common Purpose, but there are some points at the moment which don't seem to tie up. The first one is that if you're a charity, it's very reasonable that you do your work in an open way where we can see where your money is coming from and how you're using that money. You are, after all, a charity. And the overwhelming proof and evidence at the moment is that you're exceedingly secretive about where your money is coming from and how that money is used. On top of that, I'd like you to explain why it is that when we ask a city council, such as Plymouth City Council, how much you've spent on Common Purpose, instead of saying, we are delighted to tell the public that we have spent £200,000 and we think it's excellent value, they don't want to tell us how much they've spent. Now that's rather odd, isn't it? Because you run a wonderful charity, but nobody wants to tell us how much they've spent. In fact, it's taken Philip Davis as an MP to ask questions in the House to discover how much the MOD has spent or how much the Department of Social Services has spent. So it's rather odd that we have a charity where everybody seems very reluctant to say how much they've spent on it. The other thing is that if you are a Freemason, you are required to declare yourself. But Common Purpose is training people to be graduates. I'd suggest a better word is members. And yet, far from declaring themselves and saying, I am a Common Purpose person and what a brilliant charity, and I'd encourage all of you to join, they don't want to declare themselves.
Funny enough, I've written down here, like the Masons, question mark. So
Absolutely.
That comparison is interesting. One of the things that I can and will do as an MEP, I will do a written question to the Commission saying, are you aware of this organisation and have you provided any funding? And I think, although I have no great regard for the European Commission, usually, in my experience, they do give fairly straight answers to those questions. So that would be a question worth asking. Right, I will stop abusing my position as chairman and we'll go, sir, can we have your question?
Yes, my name is Frank Leeming. I'm a former senior engineer officer, ship senior engineer officer in the British Mercantile Marine. I am a former magistrate. Currently, I am an independent councillor on Derby City Council. I have been approached by this group and asked to go on one of their courses. I read their literature. This was given to me or sent to me by email officially from the council. And Derby City Council are promoting this through their workforce and to all councillors. I started to read it, and then being a Yorkshireman, I saw how much it was going to cost me, which was a little over £5,800, and I binned it. Purely for that reason, I don't see any point in me spending £5,800 at my time in life to listen to what's going on from these people. However, Mr. Gerrish, when I was invited to this meeting and I was told your name, a little bell started to ring in. I thought, Paul Gerrish, Portsmouth, surely that's the chap who writes that little newspaper which is full of libelous statements about the corruption that's going on in Portsmouth Council.
Plymouth
Council.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, if he's still here, those libelous statements must be true, so therefore they can't be libelous, so the bloke is telling the truth. He's not been arrested, not been sent into prison, not had his house taken by the bailiffs because he can't pay the fines or the court bills. So I thought, yeah, I couldn't listen. I couldn't listen to what he's saying. I am totally amazed at what you've said. I had an inkling that this organisation was similar to BIRA's organisation, and BIRA was the Politburo member for all the secret services in Russia. He was assassinated by Stalin by impregnating the curtains in his flat with cyanide. And that's how they got rid of him, because he fell foul of Stalin. But from the description you've got, I don't see any difference in the way that he operated and the way this people are operating. Their aim is the same, total domination. No democracy, no elected membership, everything governed, run by their own people selected through this programme of brainwashing. And I thank you very much for coming here.
Could I just interject briefly? It does cost money to hire the hall, so Edward is going to go around with his hat in his hand. Well, actually it isn't a hat, it's a coffee cup, and if you feel able to contribute to that would be an extremely fine thing. Very good. I'm sorry.
Can I just respond to that? Thank you very much for saying what you've said. This is, and I've brought up quite a lot of copies, this is the newspaper that I run. It was the Devonport and Plymouth column. We've now made it the UK column because it's going all over the place. There are two other papers that are working on similar lines. There's the Cornish Free Press and there's the Westminster News up in London. But we've actually been telling the truth. I've brought up this edition because in it I've done a double-page article on common purpose at work within the police force. Okay? And I will say nobody has gone for us yet, because even though we know the judges are corrupt, or a large number of them, the evidence that we've got is overwhelming. And what we're talking about, fraud and corruption in Plymouth City Council, we can prove it. So I'll leave some of those for you to read.
Excellent. We have another question, please. Sir, the back row.
Could I ask, please, you mentioned the charity. My understanding is that the Charity Commission's function is to oversee all these registered charities, and if they indulge in any malpractices, to take appropriate action.
Yeah.
Is anything of that sort underway in terms of this common purpose?
We are starting to head in that direction, but we only regard that as a little bit of a game, because I'm afraid to say that this country is basically on a knife edge at the moment. Every organisation which is designed to uphold standards has already been corrupted itself, and that includes the Charities Commission. A better example is if you take the Law Society, which is designed to police the performance of solicitors and legal firms. There are 1,700 cases outstanding where people are complaining about fraud and corruption and mismanagement and abuse of all sorts of things by the legal profession. And until last year, the chief executive of the Law Society just happened to be a lady called Janet Paraskeva, who just happened to be a very senior common purpose person and friend of Julia Middleton, the chief executive. Now, we are now going to look at these bodies, but if you go to the police and you complain to the police, if you go and complain about the police, they send you to the police complaints body, and what people are finding, not on the subject of common purpose, but on other complaints, is a wall is coming down. And the reason is that these people are already infiltrated, and the organisations are having the functions closed down. So you can do it, and in fact, you should still do what is the normal thing, but you have to remember that wherever you go, and I mean wherever you go, there is some form of political corruption in the body you go to seek help.
Right, can I just add a rider, if I may, to that question? I mean, presumably, if they are a registered charity, the accounts are published, so we can see at least where they claim to get their money from.
Yes, and we've got
whether that's accurate.
We've got copies of that. We've got copies of that, but the accounts are of an abbreviated nature, and of course, abbreviated accounts can conceal a great deal.
Just to do a quick follow-up, yes. Well, how do you see us getting out of this situation? If the whole of officialdom and semi-officialdom is riddled with these people, we're going to come up against a problem of eliminating them, or getting them out of their positions, or wherever we turn.
Yeah.
What can we do as individuals? Very little, I would have thought.
Well, on the contrary, I think we can do a lot, but what we need to do is something different to what we've been doing to date. I will answer your question, but if I can just come in sideways. How many of you are aware that there was a major debate amongst politicians about further amending the treason laws to enable debate to take place about UK becoming a republic, and that debate not being treasonous? How many of you know that debate took place? Okay, well, I only found out on the way up here because somebody gave me a call. But basically, I'd give you that because nothing could be more fundamental than your elected members of Parliament having a little secret debate about changing the whole fabric of the country. So I would suggest that when you go for help amongst politicians, you've got to be very sure the one you go to is going to help, because most of them, I believe, are rotten. Okay? But what most people do, and they've done in this game over the last 5 years, is they do the things which would make sense if the country was normal. I've got a problem, I will go to the police, they will help. The police don't help, I'll go to the police complaints. They won't help, I'll go to my MP. It's not worth a jot anymore, because all of those routes are corrupted. What we have to do is something much simpler. First of all, you need to expose what's going on. So we do ask the question about the common purpose accounts, because that takes the lid off. Oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why is that person involved? They don't like this. There's a famous saying, which I wish I had, but it says basically that no conspiracy can stand the light. The moment you've got something secret and you say, well, actually, I know what you're doing, it's not worth anything. So what we've got to do is start talking about the right things. We've got to start talking about subversion. We've got to start talking about treason. And on top of treason, we've got to start talking about what we are going to do to the people when they are caught. I regard myself as a Christian, but I'm not squeamish. And by that I mean that we are watching people commit treason. We've got proof. I'm going to talk about a policeman in a minute called Albert Burgess, who's pushing for treason, charges of treason to be brought against a whole variety of people in this country. But we need to use the words, and the people we need to use the words with are people at the bottom of the pyramid. Go to your local councillor, go to your friends next door and talk to them. And you've got to use the real word. It is very serious. The country is being destroyed. It will result in people dying because their plan is to create disturbance on the streets, because that will allow the clampdown of martial law. That's what's coming. You must go in at the bottom and use the words, and it will then filter up.
Let's try and get as many questions as we can. The gentleman in the centre of the back.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So two things I'd like to know. You mentioned Peter Mendelsohn, Michael Heseltine, Tony Blair and various others. Are you saying that they are common purpose? And also, there's a lot of allegations about on the internet that David Cameron is singing from the same hymn sheet.
Right. What we're seeing is cross-party. There's no doubt about that. So you can forget good guys are Labour or the good guys are Conservatives right the way across the parties. No, I'm not saying that I can show you that Mandelson is a common purpose member, or so is Heseltine. What I can show to you is that every time we dig into common purpose and we start to find very dubious activities with large amounts of money and funny things going on, we start to find these names clustered around it. So I think it's known by the police as circumstantial evidence. Just deal with David Cameron. David Cameron's very, very interesting because we wrote to him some time ago asking if he'd been involved with Common Purpose, and he never replied to the letter. But he is involved with an organisation called the Young Trust. And if you go and look at that on the website, you will find that the man running it is the same Jeff Mulgan. I can also tell you that Francis Maude, previous chairman of the Tory party, knew perfectly well what Common Purpose was, because he admitted in front of somebody at a Conservative Party meeting that he actually knew Julia Middleton quite well. And it was the Westminster News and my newspaper which also pointed out to people the connections between Francis Maude's website and homosexual pornography.
Could I take care of it?
Thank you. I'd like to give a couple of instances of how this thing is working. A little while ago in Leicester, there was a move afoot amongst the hospitals to take away the Gideon Bibles that were pasted in the bedside lockers. The leaders of the Muslim and Hindu communities said they had no objection to the Bibles being there. The whole thing was put up by some equalities officer or somebody like that with an anti-Christian agenda, and that does fit in with your thesis. Again, on the preparation for, shall we say, civil disturbances. About 4 years ago, I went to a remote country house in Lincolnshire by invitation through the local Federation of Small Business to a business that made aids to civil power. They got all sorts of things. Little cameras that you could go behind your tie to take pictures, little recorders that were undetectable, riot shields, different types of batons, a special type of liquid which if sprayed and you've got into your eye would put you out for 20 minutes. And they were putting that past the Health and Safety Executive to try and get clearance on that. And a new type of cartridge, sublethal cartridge, which fired something like a bit like a tea bag full of lead shot with a ribbon behind it, which would replace the baton round, and it could be fired from a repeating shotgun. Very accurate. One of those at 50 yards and you'd be out of the count. There's no doubt about it, they are preparing for government against the people.
Chairman, can I just add a bit on that? Because you mentioned the Muslims. In December last year, I can't remember the date, but I was invited by one of the senior Muslim leaders in Britain to do a talk in Birmingham Central Mosque, which I was delighted to do, because the gentleman, Dr. Mohammed Nazim, I've been working with for some time, and I'm delighted to tell you that the Muslim leaders are very well informed on what's going on in the country. But in the talk that I gave in the mosque, where I didn't give as much detail as this, but I did get to the point of telling them that, in my opinion, the Muslims are being lined up to be the new Jews. So if you look at the model in pre-war Germany, it was the Jews and communists were lined up to be the troublemakers, and that is exactly what they're doing with the Muslims. And I got a very interesting response from them.
Good, good. Oh, we have a question from a lady. We must take that.
Yeah, just at kind of a local level. Remembering the other presentation you gave, where you were telling us that you can recognise in your council by the sculptures the ugliness and the irrational decisions, irrational spending, that sort of thing. Is that a good sign to look for?
Well, we can certainly say that there is an amazing correlation between logos and how deeply a organisation has been corrupted. It's almost, I use that word, it's almost like once they've got control of an organisation, they like to put their stamp on it. And one of the things that has been happening over a number of years is that the crest, the royal crest, has been disappearing off government papers and is being replaced with little squeaky coloured logos. I'll give you an example. Devon County for ages had a wavy line which was the sea and a ship on it, and that was the heritage of Devon and Francis Drake and all the rest of it, and that has now been replaced by two little green leaves, which if you say what does that mean, it doesn't mean anything. So very often you will see that on a piece of official paper you will get a logo that when you really look at it and you say, well, that's a bit tat, that's a bit sort of weird, that is a very good indication there's something strange going on in the organisation.
Good. We've got the gentleman there, sir.
Do you know of any publications which actually highlight your case? Actually do articles about common purpose, say like private eye, do they actually mention it? Are they exposed?
At the moment, the only information that's coming out on common purpose is coming out from myself and David Noakes, who runs the EU Truth website. Although there was a gentleman, I think he was called William Clark, who wrote an excellent article in a magazine called the Valiant magazine, or Variant magazine, in 2001. And he said then that on the little he'd seen, Common Purpose was a fraudulent, elitist organisation. So we are working very hard on getting more stuff published. The newspapers have been a huge success because we're getting, well, some days now we're getting several phone calls a day of people calling us and saying, this makes sense with what I've been seeing in my hospital or my council.
Could I just ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
I mean, they're pushing presumably hundreds or maybe thousands of people through these programs. Surely there is at least one of those people who will come out afterwards and say, I'm going to blow the whistle on this, this is what we were told.
Well, we've actually, you've raised a very good point, something I'd like to just give you. Common Purpose on the major courses has got about 26,000 graduates. These are people who've done at least a 2-day course. And they're people I would consider to have been reasonably well indoctrinated. So we're not dealing with hundreds of thousands, but of course you only need 50 or 100 of these people in a big city, and they can cause a lot of problems. All right? Having said that, just because you go on a Common Purpose course doesn't mean to say you're instantly got. It's shades of grey. Some people, we can see quite substantial changes in them and their personalities. Other people walk away and say it's crap. Okay? So out of the 25,000, if I had to guess, I'd guess that probably only about 2,500, 3,000 people are really badly affected by it, and the others are somewhere in between. We know that just like the religious cults, Common Purpose works by putting friends alongside people, and they sort of steer them. Yeah? I've drifted off a little bit there, but I just wanted to raise that point because I think it was an important one. But you asked about the numbers, and there was something else.
Well, I was asking for somebody who would be, as it were, a whistleblower, who would come along and say, I've been to one of these courses and I can tell you what it was like.
We've got those people. We've also got people who are doing courses at the moment. Out of the people who've come forward to us, we've got everything. There was several ladies in the initial days who were in a very bad state. And I could talk about that. We've helped them. But people are frightened. This is the key thing. This is an answer to you as a charity, is when you say to somebody, come and tell us about I'd rather not. Instinctively, people know they've got caught up in something that's not right. They just know it. So some are mentally disturbed, and we've had to work very hard on those to help them get back. Others are frightened and don't want to talk, but we have got people who've talked, and we have got notes, and we are getting intelligence from inside the organisation. But if you want to brainwash somebody, change their views, it's better if they don't know you're going to do it in the first place, because the moment you know what you're looking for, it's all obvious. I was given a course at work a couple of weeks ago. A little chit appeared on my desk, and it said I was going to a reframing course. I thought, well, that's very interesting. I'm going to be reframed. Very quickly, I'll tell you what they did. About 8 of us in a room with 2 facilitators, and on the table were little chits of paper with words on. Assertive, confident, happy, creative, all sorts of adjectives. And you had to pick an adjective which best suited your character. The lady I sat next to chose happy. I chose creative, special reason for that. And other people took other cards. And then they went round the table, and you had to say why you picked the cards. So the lady said, well, I'm generally happy. I enjoy making people cheerful, and I'm known as being a happy person. And the facilitator said to her, well, that's excellent. Are there any occasions when it wouldn't be appropriate to be happy? And she sort of, well, I suppose if somebody had had something bad happen to them, or a bereavement, it wouldn't be appropriate. And he said, well, that's absolutely true. And then he asked me, why did you... And I said, well, I'm quite a creative person. I like doing new things, and I like challenging things. I was teasing him, but he didn't know it, basically. What he'd done to the woman was he chipped away at part of her makeup. She was happy. She was a happy person. And what he'd done is put a little seed in her mind that maybe being happy isn't good. It's a tiny little seed, but it was there. We then produced 2 lists of everything we liked about the company and everything we didn't like. The like list was that, and the dislike list was that. So we pushed the like list, and we just looked at the criticisms. And what we had to do was turn every criticism into a positive. So you went through, and, well, that could mean that, and that's actually quite positive. So we got rid of that criticism, got rid of that criticism. Then it came down to the toilets. The toilets are a disgrace. They are dirty, ceiling tiles, wall tiles, they smell, men and women's toilets. They're a disgrace. Well, that was turned into a positive because people didn't spend too long in them. Now, you laugh, but what we're touching on is what political correctness is about. Because if toilets are dirty, there's a fundamental baseline that's not acceptable. It's not a question of how long you spend in there. They're dirty, disgusting. But what was done was everybody was gently eased into the fact, well, everything else, not a problem. That's reframing. That's taking one set of views and gently shifting it right to another set of views. And I've gently reframed you today, I hope.
We've got a group of people over here. I think we've got to give this side of the room a turn. Sir? Yeah.
Not a question, but some quick observations on the subject of treason, which you've raised, and also on a local matter. Starting with treason, we are at the start of a major, one of the biggest battles we've ever had to fight, and that is to fight the EU Constitution Treaty.
Yep.
And the basis on which we must fight that is that we already have a centuries-old constitution, and the government and other forces are playing ducks and drakes with that constitution. Now, the 2 examples of treason, one about 4 years ago, several of us, and I think Edward was included, we enacted, we took steps to go into magistrates' courts to exercise what is called misprision, And misprision is if you know of a crime being plotted and you conceal it, you can be charged and found guilty. So this was a laying of information with the help of lawyers into a magistrate's court here in Leicester and elsewhere, and present information about treason being committed by Faulkner, Jack Straw, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and Derry Irvine. Derry Irvine, because we didn't want him to hear the case against himself at that time. Now, that was my duty fulfilled in presenting information to the magistrate. The ancient statutory requirement is you present it to what was then called the sheriff, and he should take over. Now you can imagine the consternation, but it was several weeks later that I was told that if I felt strongly about this, the magistrates could do nothing. If I felt strongly, I should go to the police. Now, what was the point of that? The second instance of treason, which I've been involved in, and it comes back to changes, a matter of about 3 years ago, when we tried through Ann Palmer to bring charges of treason. And in part of that, we drew attention to the fact that foreign nationals were being recruited into the British police force, and magistrates from foreign countries were also being appointed. Both of those against our own constitution. Both of those things are debarred. However, we discovered that this was the case and presented the evidence to, I think at that time, John Stevens, who to his credit suspended all the magistrates. There were 22 at that time. And in a matter of a few weeks, the law was changed. And of course, it had to be changed in a sense, because otherwise every case heard by those magistrates would have been null and void. So, two examples where whatever the forces are behind all of this, whether it's common purpose or whatever, as I say, playing ducks and drakes with our own constitution. Now, at local level, for information people living in Leicester, on the first occasions I came across common purpose. I write quite a bit in the Leicester Mercury, and the Leicester Mercury 6 days a week has a first-person column on a whole wide range of topics. I opened the paper about 2 years ago and was very, very surprised to see a first-person column on common purpose. Very surprised that the contributor, the young girl who had written this, was an Asian girl. I think she was about 19 or so, and she was employed by a local photographic shop. Now, you used the words about changing people's worlds, Brian, earlier on, and I was very much struck by the fact that this young girl had been completely seduced by attending a common purpose. She was brimming over with enthusiasm. It had changed her life. I was very surprised, went into the website and found, of course, that the editor at that time was on the advisory panel, Nick Carter, on the advisory panel. And I think they rotate these things every now and again. He's not there, the local chief constable is on the advisory panel. One of the things that puzzled me very much about that was how on earth did that young girl get on that course? Frank has mentioned £5,000. I think it kicks off something like about £3,000, etc. I can't imagine that there was any way in which that young girl financed that herself. So these things are going on.
Right. Can I just answer that? Because I will answer the bit about the treason. Common purpose charges for a course, the key course like Matrix, where you do 2-day residential, that's when they really get you, and a day a month for another 12 months. Costs £3,950 plus VAT. A course like the 2021, which Maria Wallace, Chief of Police, would have done, would have been £9,950 plus VAT. Usually the money's paid out of the public purse. That's why when I ask Plymouth City Council, how much have you spent on common purpose, they don't want to tell me. They're closing care homes, but they can spend money on common purpose, so they don't want to tell me. But you are selected. You can go, if you know where it is, and knock on a common purpose office door and say, I'd like to do the course, and they say, thank you very much. Would you like to fill in this application form? And the application form will ask you for quite a lot of personal information. It basically be psychological profile. What's your job? How much power have you got? What have you liked? What don't you like? Where are you going? Then the advisory board team will select you. And do you remember the comment where I said the man is to Ipswich? That was the advisory board saying, no, we don't think this man's... So you are selected. This is another thing which, as a charity, makes it horrible, because there are vicars sitting on advisory panels saying, no, 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 this person isn't suitable. So they're selected. If they get a candidate who they think is a good candidate in a good position that they can mould and grow, they will give her a bursary. Common Purpose will pay for her to do the course. That's how it works. So can I do the treason?
Oh, sorry.
Because I think this is very important.
After that, we'll have one more question, and I think we're running up against time.
Okay, this issue of treason is very, very important. I'm going to suggest, and I've got to be careful here, because I admit I am a bit of a newcomer. Some of you have been battling for years and years and years, and along comes the newcomer, and you've got to be wary of the smart-arse syndrome. This is my newspaper, and here's a big article on Albert Burgess and treason. And the headline is, where corrupt law lords fail, ordinary people take treason charges to the police. Okay? Now, when you did what you did, I'm going to suggest you did the right things, absolutely the right things, but without the knowledge that the whole system around you was corrupt. And the second thing was that the media did not support you. Well, we've got a solution to that. We create our media. Now, I can tell you that this little newspaper has got the local Plymouth paper shitting themselves, because the Evening Herald, it is widely rumoured and alleged, is losing 8% of sales a year because they are not reporting anything worth reading. And in this paper, we've done an editorial pointing out how rubbish the paper is. So this, coming out once a month at between 10 and 15,000 copies, is frightening the local paper. But the other thing we did is we've gone to talk to individual reporters over a beer, over a cup of tea, and said, look at the paperwork yourself. And they are now very interested that their paper is being controlled by Common Purpose, to the extent they're now telling us what's going on. Can't tell you any more because I shall spoil things, okay? But what people are trying to do is to change a whole organisation by going to the top. But that's where the corruption is. If you go into a police station, as this man has done, and we want it to happen, and he says, I want to report treason, and then the copper says a load of bluster, and he's not going to do it, you're all misprision of treason, you're guilty of treason then. What's your name? Wallop. He's going to appear in the paper. And I have been stunned at the reaction when you put the stories in the paper. We've had 2 people who phoned us up and sworn at us, and the other phone calls have been from people who said, I want to tell you about this, I've got paperwork, I've got documents. So the other bit that we're using as the lever is the fraud and corruption. They are creating fraud and corruption. And if you show people your taxes are going here, they get very interested, and then they ask a magic question, why? And you say, oh, well, that's easy, that's Common Purpose. What the is that? You don't know what it is, you then tell them what Common Purpose is. Well, where's all that come from? The European Union. And you've got them up 5 steps in about a 10-minute conversation. So it's getting in. You were doing the right thing, but at the wrong time because the ground wasn't fertile. We got some different ways.
Good. Gentlemen over here, can we have one? This is one last question, and I'm sorry, but we are aiming to conclude at 4 o'clock.
Just short.
Fascinating as this is. So if we can take this as the last question, thank you.
I wasn't aware of the full activities of the Common Purpose, but looking at some of the names that have been put up, is there any influence from the Bilderberg group in respect of this?
Well, I believe totally, but if I say I know something, I know it because I can prove it. I'm going to say I believe in this case because you start getting into circumstantial evidence. Do I believe the Bilderbergers are real? Most certainly. Do I believe they are a fascist-based organisation? Most certainly. Do I believe they're very dangerous? Most certainly. Do I see links between the people linked to the fraud and corruption and top level of common purpose associated with Bilderbergers? Yes. And to change the subject slightly, it was very interesting that Ed Balls was reported in the paper as using public money to attend a Bilderbergers meeting. Bilderbergers say themselves that people attend as individuals, but he used public money to attend in his official capacity. Wasn't that remarkably similar as the man of the Government Office Southwest who said, I am a member of Common Purpose in my... There is, when you follow it through, there's a style. And I believe the Bilderbergers are clearly there, so is the Council for Foreign Relations, and so definitely is the Tavistock Institute.
When Blair, in one of his honest remarks, said he'd never been there.
Yeah, but of course Mr. Blair was chairman of the Fabian Society, and if you follow the Fabians through, you're back in the same mess.
Could I just mention about Ed Balls, our previous chairman for 23 years, when I say our, Campaign for Independent Britain, Lord Stoddart, has just recently raised that question in Parliament about who financed the Ed Balls visit to Bilderberg. He's asked for that. So yet we're waiting for a statement.
Well, but it was reported in the press, and in fact I've also reported it. I'm going to be a little bit careful here, but I want to say this. Lord Stoddart was given some material on common purpose. Now I have a problem. If I give people a little bit, they say that's not enough. Where's the proof? If I give them a lot, though I'm too busy to read that. But Lord Stoddart was given what I regarded was a package in the middle. And what he said was, this man, Brian Gerrish, has said that a company set up in Plymouth City Council called the Single Regeneration Budget Company has spent 51 million with no proper audited accounts. Lord Stoddart said, I believe, in my opinion, that cannot possibly be true. And therefore I don't believe what he's saying on common purpose. But unfortunately for Lord Stoddart, what I say about the 51 million is true, and I can prove it. We have got to fight, and at the moment we are not fighting because people do not understand how serious it is. I am going to preach a little bit, but I have wasted tens of thousands of pounds of my personal money on UKIP to discover the higher levels of UKIP attending common purpose courses or facilities. I am seeing people talk about the European Union as if it's a boys' club. It isn't. And the real threat to this country isn't Brussels, it is what is happening in your local council. If you solve the problem in your local council first, the rest will solve itself. But we need to act very quickly because we are dealing with people that our parents dealt with, and they understand their mentality is murder. And I'm sorry if you find that a depressing subject on a Saturday afternoon, but when we give talks, we talk in this language. And I guarantee you, after every meeting, we have people coming to us saying, tell us what we can do. But what is happening in a lot of the organisations that I see, I will leave it that broad, is people are still frightened to use the language. This country is being attacked, and the people who are attacking us want to destroy our society. They want to destroy our schools, hospitals, children. And that is the level of understanding you need before you can start to move forward. Can we beat them? Yes.
Good. Right. Just a comment, I'm not here to defend Stoddart. By his own admission, he had gone stale. He's 80, he stepped down. He continues to do fantastic work. He couldn't make the connection between common purpose and the EU. Now we have moved on. We have a very, very dynamic new chairman, Dr. Bob Spink, so you will find a considerable difference already.
Common purpose, about it, I feel now very much better informed, and I thank you for that, and I'm sure that we all feel the same way. So I think we should. And I decided that might not be quite the thing, so what I have got is a commemorative mug with the same artwork on as the card that you're all going to send to your MPs, yes, demanding a referendum on the European Constitution. And while Edward's over there, thank you very much indeed, Edward, one of those for you. And before we finally wind up, I'd like to ask Edward to say a few words about an important event.
It will take place near Parliament, and it will be followed by a meeting in the Queen Elizabeth II Conference Centre, which will cost £10 per head. So we hope that as many of you as possible will attend that conference, which will have some lively speakers, including, I think, maybe...
Indeed, I believe